Today we're going to dive through in this capacity building program of GILL, not only with our experts from the project, but also with colleagues from another very relevant project that is called equalsu.org. And today we are going to have just at the beginning a few presentations, and there will be also Joe Kramer as coordinator of equalsu.org, who is going to present you about the project, but most importantly about the tools they have developed for gender innovation approaches. And I don't want to spoil too much, so I will leave it to Joe for later. But there will be some three exciting tools that we are going to present you that have been developed, one in equalsu.org and other two in GILL projects, to support you in applying this gendered innovation approach. I will give you guidance because this is going to be very interactive. So we're going to have three different breakout rooms. I will explain you later how we're going to move to the breakout rooms. But just at the beginning, we will give you very quick presentations about the GILL project, about the tools. Then we will move to the interactive part. I will start then with the GILL project very briefly. What is GILL for the ones who don't know us yet, and what we are going to work on in the next years. GILL is a project funded by the European Commission. We have been funded and started at the beginning of January 2023, and we have 3 years project where we're going to really work on this idea of gendered innovation applied to the concept of living labs and open innovation. We have around 17 partners working together with us from 10 different countries. And you will see that GILL is all about, in the next slide, working together in order to support through this consortium, which has very nice representation of basically almost all the countries in Europe, working together from the quadruple helix. So which means that we have both academia, universities, research centers, private companies, local government authorities with Alba Iulia municipality, and of course, the European Network of Living Labs, bringing together the community of living labbers all around the world. In the next, you will see what we're really working on. The main focus is to develop really learning for everyone, accessible to everyone. So we are going to develop one-stop shop collaboration and learning hub for reducing gender barriers in innovation and entrepreneurship, which means that we are not only working with supporting women, but we are also working in supporting gender diversity and inclusion of all categories of stakeholders. Of course, women innovation entrepreneurship support will be also a focal part of GILL, but we're also working on developing this as really the community for everyone to learn, to work together, to peer-to-peer learning, and to create a network of gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship in the EU. How we're going to do that? We are working with these 3 vertical sectors. So we have working pilots on health and resilience, green transition, and digital transformation. So all our work is spent throughout these 3 vertical sectors while we're doing really practice on the ground activities on the different European countries. In the next one, we show you what is the novelty of GILL. Of course, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. You probably know that usually the gendered approach is being seen by fixing the 3 fixes, fixing the numbering, fixing the institution, and fixing the knowledge. What we really want to try to do with GILL is to fix the practices, what is really working in terms of, or not working in terms of culture in all the different contexts. So not only internally for the employees, but also externally for the stakeholders when they're going to work together in order to develop this gendered innovation approach. So we really focus in fixing the practices and the culture through the Living Labs approach, because as you might know, Living Labs is all about open innovation, transnational experimentation, but also working on the practice on the ground with real targeted stakeholders. In the next one, I will show you about our objectives. So we have 4 main priorities in which we declined our objective. Enable organizational and cultural change, as I was saying, is all about fixing the practices. Enhance professional development to really support women, but also people that feel excluded usually, to be involved in this process with a good approach. To increase the integration of gender and diversity then into product design, technologies, and innovation. We work a lot on this, and that's why today we're going to work in the workshop on the gender design of ICT tools. And finally, to allow gendered educational practices. It's all about training, learning, and put it into practice in the end, right? Then in the next one, I would like to show you what is our target audience. We always say in Living Labs, we have a quadruple helix stakeholders, which means that we involve the companies. It can be startups, it can be SMEs, but also large industries. We have academia, so research, universities, and research centers organizations. Government, it can be a local government, a national government, regional government, but also at more international level to involve policymakers. And finally, the civil society, which is the citizens, but can also be NGOs and organizations working with, for example, in neighborhood associations to support the engagement of these stakeholders. The final result, it's about co-creating with them. We really want everyone to be involved in the process since the beginning. In the next, what we are going to do here. So we have 15 action-oriented experimentation in 8 European countries, which means pilots. We will develop these new approaches for gender innovation by testing, evaluating the changes in some Living Labs that are already developed and other Living Labs that's going to be developed through the piloting experimentation. And these are the countries that are represented. In the next, you will see that how we're going to do it. We're going to work with our partners first, but then we want to enlarge this community. It's not just all about us, about these 15 pilots. We want to involve the stakeholders in assessing how innovation is supported, generating new ideas, scoping women's input into these other horizontal teams. And the horizontal teams we have is individual and team, tools and methods, innovation and products, and societal processes. So through the IOEs, we want to make a change in real communities by working in the 3 different verticals and focusing on these 4 horizontal teams. The next, we really go a little bit through this. So we are going to have a matrix of horizontal sphere and vertical priorities working together, and the end result is, next. We offer this pan-European collaboration hub based on the Living Lab principles, which means it's an open access IT platform that is presenting and offering a series of services and tools. It's a co-design methodologies for recommendations, services, but also tools that are working on increasing really gender responsive, smart innovation and entrepreneurship. So what is the GILL Hub about? The next slide, you will see that is a pan-European virtual learning, sustainable and collaborative hub. What is the novelty between what is already available and existing? So we have scouting the benchmarking, what is out there, and what we want to really develop is to integrate what is already out there, but building on the Living Lab principles with an open innovation and co-creation approach. This is going also to be co-created. We have done quite a lot of workshop internally, but also we have co-created with our external expert, the gender intelligence group experts, how we should have been creating the GILL Hub, which now is under development and is going to be available for you as a first experiencers, I don't want to say testers, users of this platform by the end of December of this year. So you can really give us feedback, and we really want to make it user-friendly as much as possible. In the next slide, you see here what are the modules of GILL. We're going to have, of course, a landing page where you can find roadmaps, manuals, what's in the hub, but also a self-assessment learning tool to check what you need in terms of learning. In the Learning and Sharing Hub, there will be an academy with different training materials. The previous webinar we have developed and this workshop, as you see, are recorded because we are going also to bring into the platform to upload there the results of these capacity building initiatives. There will be a mentoring program and also a collaborative system based on GILL Cloud, where we have a repository and a series of toolbox and dashboards for visual map and visualization. You will be also able to create surveys through a polling system. And finally, you will be able to access this community, ask your own questions, and take knowledge through the use of the GILL tool. How we have envisioned to create the capacity building program. So we have done internally an analysis with our partners, and we have found out that how to make it different from previous capacity building program is this integration of the gendered innovation approach through living labs. So we're going to focus on these specific topics for living labs, which is how to set up a living lab, how to manage it, how to develop a governance model or business model, and to experiment through the living lab approach. And we will have a series of capacity building initiatives where you can learn these topics, but also some gender and cross-cutting topics, like, for example, what does it really mean to do co-creation with the gender-responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship approach, how to work with the field language to include everyone in the process, how to develop policies in this context to assess the results of what we have produced, and working on implementing gender and diversity action plans. And we also say that the GILL capacity building program is dynamic. Why it's dynamic? Because when you're entering to the platform, you will have a very quick and simple survey to answer, where you can have some results from the answer you have done, where you can really test your knowledge, your starting knowledge about living labs and gendered innovation approaches. So the self-assessment tool will give you some scoring and personalized recommendations and provide you with a list of GILL training materials that you can access. The more you watch these videos or complete these training materials, then you get some badges, and also you can have the possibility to book a mentor for half an hour, categorized on different topics, where you can get an answer, get your questions and answers through this mentoring program, and finally get a certificate. So at the end, what we want to produce is just the GILL community of practice. So we have done it through experts, to the pilots, with the sisters projects, and that's why also equalsu.org is nicely with us today. The Living Labs network from ENOL, but also from outside ENOL. That's also the presence today of the Nicola Marsden and also Edda Celine, representing also Living Labs in Germany, working on this approach, and then the stakeholders community. And all of this, we're going to bring you together through our tools, the hub, the framework we're developing, and the policies that we're going to develop. And finally, we have just opened up a working group on gendered innovation living labs. We will put your link in the chat in case you want to join us. It's open to everyone. We can work together through this working group. And I think these are my last slides. Thank you so much. And I leave the floor to Nicola Marsden and Edda Celine, for their presentation on the tools of GILL. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francesca. Yes. So in the GILL project, we're developing and testing methods to improve gender fairness, right? And now you probably wonder how we want to do this to really make sure that we are using the potential, especially if we're looking at ICT tools, of every part of society and really create innovative technology that benefits everybody in the end. So if you want to know how we're doing this, you've already heard about the GILL spheres of innovation. And we're using this as a framework to structure the areas of intervention, right? So we have these 4 quadrants that we're looking at. For one thing, the innovations themselves, then the societal processes, the people and the individuals and the teams, and then the tools and the methods that they are using to create ICT tools. And to understand this, let's maybe on the next slide start with an example that shows us that ICT design is always gendered, right? So a few years ago, one of the major tech companies released a health app. And it was promoted with the claim that one could track all relevant body functions with this app, meaning you could monitor all vital metrics concerning your own body. That was a very bold promise, and the app was released, and what was missing was cycle tracking, menstruating. So the question naturally arises, whose relevant body functions are we talking about if I can record my intake of trace elements, but not my period, right? So, and on the there was a huge outcry, as you can see here, after the release. It was a huge embarrassment, actually, and Apple was very, very fast to fix this. But the fact that it actually happened, of course, is very instructive for looking at the process of ICT development, right? And so if we're looking through this, at this through the lens of our four horizontal themes or spheres, we see here at the top left regarding the product itself, the innovation, the app, that the app was launched and women were not considered at all, meaning the app produces exclusions, right? It's not for everyone, and it only keeps its promise of tracking all important body functions for some people, and it excludes people who menstruate. So that's women in and through the app, right? The male is taken as the default, women are not mentioned, and they're, of course, then through this made invisible. And this has implications for the second sphere on the top right. Here we're looking at the societal processes, at the social norms and the biases that are reified through the app. So the app communicates that the body functions of women are not that important. And of course, it also conveys that it's not primarily for women. They can, of course, they're welcome to use it, but they are kind of implied. So through the technology and through the societal norms, who has the power, who's just tagging along, who's also meant, they're mutually reconstructed. So this is the process of co-construction between, of course, technology and society. And against this backdrop, it might be not so surprising when we look into the next quadrant here, into the tech companies, and we see that the people there are mostly composed of teams with men. So women are less frequent, teams are male dominated, and of course also in this kind of a situation, women don't want to be the token woman who then has to say, okay, what do women want or something like that. They just want to be regular team members. And it's also important to see that we are in a cycle. So it's rather unlikely that cycle tracking would have been forgotten if the team setup or if the team makeup would have been differently, and if the team consisted mainly of women, or if female pilot users even had been included in the development process. So in the next sphere, we are looking at the tools, at the methods, at the processes that are used to design the system. So the question is, which databases were they operating on when they were developing this system, this health app? Which tools in terms of processes were they using? Did they have a human-centered design process? Doesn't seem like it, right? Were users surveyed? Were they maybe actively involved? All things where we're talking about participation. And it seems like all this didn't happen. And actually what happened would be more like what we call I methodology, that the people thought for themselves, the development team kind of thought, okay, what would I like? And then just created it. So kind of reflecting their own wishes and putting it into the project. And this, of course, is where the cycle closes to the ICT product, or to the health app in this case, that comes out as a result. And there you can see how the whole cycle actually works, because you have homogeneous male development teams that implement a system without the participation of diverse user groups, which then leaves half of humanity out, and thereby in turn exacerbates the situation in the world that actually recreates that there's only so few women in the team, right? So that's the cycle. And now if we're looking at how can we intervene? How can we change that? Then we've already heard about the Gender Innovation Project, which of course very wisely said we do need to fix the numbers, fix the institutions, and fix the knowledge. And we're adding this fourth fix, where we're saying we're fixing what people do in their everyday life. And we argue that there's like two basic approaches to doing this. You can insert moments of reflection in your everyday life and try to figure out, okay, where are the exclusions? Where do you yourself, or where do I fall prey to implicit biases, to stereotypes? Where do we stand as a team? So one intervention here, for example, would be an anti-bias training, right? You become aware of your implicit association, and you learn that modern research on stereotypes has actually shown we can all be discriminating without being prejudiced, right? And then you can take these reflections into your everyday life and install them in a certain way. The other way is, the other approach is to directly change the way things are done, right? So let me give you an example from the field of sustainability, which is similar in the sense that just like most people don't want to be gender exclusive or something like that, most people also want to act sustainably, right? It was still, hotels were having a nightmare with people leaving their hotel room with the lights on, okay? Although people all want to be sustainable. And it was like that until they made it so it would automatically go off because you had to slip your key card into the slot by the door, right? And this immediately changed the behavior because nobody left the light on then, and there was no appeal, there was no reflection needed. It was kind of integrated by design. So the practice of leaving your hotel room without turning the light off was fixed by design and by a change of how things were done. And this is kind of what we're striving for in many of our tools. So we want to fix exact existing practices and make them more gender responsive, right? And that's the thing that's really innovative, I think, about our approach. It's not the changes themselves, actually, but the fact that these little tweaks in the right place can have a great impact regarding gender responsiveness. So on the next slides, there's a couple of examples here. If we're looking, for example, at our method of diversity personas, okay? Personas are meant to represent users in the development process. But there's a tendency in development processes and in design thinking also to really create them on the basis of bias and make them extremely stereotypical, and even think they're better when they're stereotypical. So our method of diversity personas fixes this practice of making stereotypical personas by explicitly breaking with biases and stereotypes, and by, for example, overrepresenting marginalized groups. Then we have avoiding gendered assignments, and there the idea is that if you're looking at the tasks to be done in a workplace, there are those that are career enhancing, like presenting in front of upper management or something, and then there's those that also need to be done. You know, you need to schedule a meeting, onboard a new team member, I don't know, organize the Christmas party. And research shows that women do much more of these office housework chores, whereas men do much more of the glamour work, okay, the career enhancing tasks. And our method of avoiding gendered assignments, or we're now calling it dodging gendered duties, fixes this practice of gendered assignments and makes sure that all tasks are evenly distributed over the genders. Then the next one here is gender responsive. No, sorry, back on the last slide, the next method would be gender responsive cognitive walkthrough. So that would fix the practice of software evaluation as it's done in cognitive walkthroughs today by the development team. We have the method of round robin to fix the practices, the practice of letting people just dominate the meeting and run loose in meetings, and let the often discriminating and negative group dynamics develop. Or we have masking gender to fix the practice of hiring, right? Where we know that from the blind auditions in the 70s with the symphony orchestras, our own biases massively influence our perceptions of other people, also in the process of hiring. And of course, blinding this can help with that. And there are many more on the next slide there. Now you see the whole collection and all the different methods. In the breakout then, we will have a closer look at two of them. One of them is dodging gender duties. So, and the other one is diversity personas. And I don't want to go into detail because we're going to be talking about them or in the breakouts. But just to kind of familiarize you with the setup of this template that we've made. So you see in the left column, you can see where this method stands in relation to the GILL objectives. In terms of, is it doing or is it reflecting or is it both of them, regarding the spheres of innovation and the 4 quadrants that we have been talking about, where do the main interventions take place? And then also we heard that living labs are always co-creation process, a co-design process, and here we have different phases that this can be helpful for this method. And then in the middle part, you find the description of the method and sources for further reading. And on the right-hand side, you find information why this is important regarding gender responsive, smart innovation, and entrepreneurship. And then at the bottom, you find steps that you should go through to use this method in practice. So in the breakout, we'll look at the methods, dodging gender duties and diversity personas, use them on a case study. And also we brought a canvas to actually then work with them. But that's going to be in the breakout for now. I thank you and would like to hand over to Joe.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nicola, for this nice and interesting presentation. We now hand over quickly to Joe Kramer from equalsu.org. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's really great to be able to join you today and really interesting work. I think our projects are very well aligned. I'm Dr. Joe Kramer. I'm an Associate Professor at Oslo Met and in the Faculty of Technology, Art and Design. And I'm the Project Coordinator of Equals EU. And if you can't pick the accent, I'm Australian. Next slide, please. So in this presentation now, before we go to the breakout groups, I'll just give you some overall context of the project that we've been doing at Equals EU and outline some of the main activities and pick up on a few key findings that I think in the conversation that we're having today, you'll find quite interesting that have come out of the project overall. But then I'll try to get very quickly to the ICT tools that we've been developing. Next slide, please. So similar to your own project, we have a consortium of 19 organisations in Equals EU, which brings together higher education as well as small and medium enterprises, civil society organisations and research institutions. And we've come together in a capacity building project. And through these multilateral partnerships, we're looking to strengthen and formalise new networks for social innovation and entrepreneurship and to further create smart, sustainable and inclusive social innovation ecosystems, both in local communities and cities in Europe and in non-European countries of the global north and south, where some of our partners are active. And it's an initiative funded by EU Horizon 2020. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of an overview of the whole project, we're coming up to the conclusion of our project. We wrap up at the end of the year. We began in 2021, and fundamentally the Equals EU project is structured around a 4-step plan towards gender equity, and this has guided the project activities since we began. The first phase was to produce a mapping of key stakeholders in the social innovation ecosystems and a systemic evaluation of gender equity and digital inclusion innovations in ICT products, services and policies in 20 EU countries and 2 associated countries. And the main outcome of this activity are a policy brief and a series of country fact sheets. An additional important finding that emerged from this activity comes in the form of a lexicon of gender equity terminology, and I'll discuss that a bit more in a moment. In 2022, we ran a series of hackathons and innovation camps across and beyond Europe, and these focused on producing new solutions for digital inclusion, particularly of women and girls, and new ICT products and services for gender equity. The winners from those events were invited to join an incubation program to further develop their winning solutions through a mentoring program. During that time, the participants of that program also contributed to the co-creation of the gender equity tools I'll talk about in a moment. And following the incubator program, participants attended 3 weeks of professional development boot camps. It was a summer school that was held in Riga, Geneva and Valencia last June. Next slide, please. So I'll give you a couple of key findings for building capacity in gender inclusive innovation that have come from the project before talking about the tools more specifically. Next slide, please. So data from the Equals EU research and focus group discussions has revealed various factors that are required for an innovation-friendly environment, and this has informed a policy brief produced by the project. The policy brief takes the empirical contribution and outlines its input to what Equals recommends as a gender inclusive innovation standard. And it further outlines 3 key recommendations on gender inclusive social innovation ecosystems on the importance of recruitment, retention and reward. And a further 3 areas are identified for urgent action: that language requires close attention to mitigate social biases, that measuring metrics are key to hold policies, standards and reforms accountable, and funding and resources are important in implementing change. Next slide, please. A key insight to share from this work is that the data collected highlights the problematic use of some terminology that, if used interchangeably or misused, can veil attempts to socially transforming innovation ecosystems. And so in support of this, our policy brief document includes a glossary of gender-related terms. This is not to pin down definitions, but to expose the challenge around this terminology in different contexts. So our work highlights that contextual differences should always be kept in mind in communication and dissemination actions regarding gender equality. This means we need to localise concepts, not just translate words. As a result, the project is developing a lexicon of gender-related words localised for different regions, which will be published online as a web application before the conclusion of the project. This is actually an additional body of work that we've taken on beyond what we said we were going to do in the original project, because it is such a rich finding from our work. So we'll definitely circulate information about that to your group once we have that available. One of the main objectives of Equals EU has been to work directly with young women in their local contexts. If you want to move to the next slide. So looking to build capacity in gender inclusive innovation across the consortium, across the geographical region we've been working in. 21 in 22, we held 19 hackathons and innovation camps that focused on developing solutions or products to increase gender equity and inclusiveness in STEM or policy making. And really interestingly, one of the key insights we gleaned from hosting so many of these events across such a wide geographical area is to again notice the importance of language used to describe each of these events. Many of our partners found it easier to recruit female participants when organising innovation camps, suggesting that the description of events as a hackathon could be a deterrent to young female students. That a hackathon may be considered as too rooted in male-dominated tech and social innovation culture. So there isn't time to talk about the incubator program or the summer school in detail, but just to flag that the project, we will be making available all of the teaching materials that we produced for the summer school and for the mentoring program as we conclude the project in the next couple of months. So they will become live on our website for anyone to download and reuse for themselves. So the best way to kind of keep up to date with that, I guess, is to follow us on LinkedIn. We have a page and we also have a network that we're starting there now too. So next slide, please. So I'm going to assume here that everyone agrees that diversity, equity and inclusion in business can lead to improved financial performance, increased innovation, enhanced employee satisfaction and a more positive company reputation. I don't think we need to go over the data in too much detail here. So as part of our capacity building work towards institutional change, we've prototyped 2 gender equity tools for digital inclusion, and these really draw on all of the knowledge that we have developed throughout our project. The first tool is the Sustainable Social Impact Model on the left, and the second tool is the Value Creation Model Canvas on the right. They're both essentially business development tools, and they seek to improve gender equality in already established organisations, but also to ensure that it's built into new organisations at the beginning of the lifespan of an organisation. The tools have been co-created with consortium members and participants in the incubator program and summer school. We consider them to be at the moment at a resolved prototype stage, ready for further testing. Next slide, please. So the Sustainable Social Impact Model is a business development framework for gender inclusive social innovation ecosystems that seeks to ensure a new idea or product or service has a positive gender inclusive impact. The overarching goal of digital inclusion is addressed by promoting value creation, social impact, and sustainable commercial growth in innovation through a gender equity lens. And here, sustainable social impact means actively managing and identifying the effects businesses have on employees, workers throughout the value chain, customers, and local communities. Next slide, please. So it's set up as a worksheet, and by working through the worksheet in a workshop setting with a facilitator to speak to these ideas around our anti-bias training and tools that are bias interrupting, that's actually essentially what we're seeking to do here with this tool. It opens up conversations, it makes the system visible to the organisation and starts to prompt conversations that need to be had to try and address where diversity is perhaps being overlooked and businesses are not being as inclusive as they need to be, or perhaps think that they are being. So this is the tool that we'll look at in more detail in the breakout group and actually go through this and unpack how we're going about this and how to use this tool. And get feedback from the people in the group as well. Since we're in the piloting phase, we're really looking for further input into this one. Next slide, please. So the Value Creation Model Canvas is an iteration on the established business model environment developed by Strategyzer in 2015. Next slide, please. So this is probably something that's very familiar to a lot of you, I would say. So next slide, please. The equals EU Value Creation Model Canvas extends on the business model canvas by overlaying 4 lenses. The idea is to utilise both the business model canvas and the value creation model canvas when developing a new idea. Each lens comprises a set of trigger questions for a startup to work through to assess if the areas have been adequately addressed to accommodate the needs of diverse stakeholders. The 4 lenses are gender equity, sustainable development, digital inclusion, and inclusive design. And similarly to the Sustainable Social Impact Model, this Value Creation Model Canvas is formatted as a worksheet at this stage, the idea to be used in a workshop setting. Every effort has been made to make both of these tools as practical and as easy to adopt within established business development practices as possible. We're looking for tools to inflect existing business practices into new directions, and that's why we've taken this approach of sort of integrating lenses on top of the business model canvas rather than replacing the canvas entirely with something else. Next slide, please. So just as a quick example, the first lens is gender equity, and the definition we're looking at here for gender equity is the provision of fairness and justice in the distribution of benefits and responsibilities between women and men. So the concept recognises that women and men have different needs and power, and that these differences should be identified and addressed in a manner that rectifies the imbalances between the sexes. So next slide, please. So in unpacking that within the organisation, using the Canvas model that we've created, we've put together a series of sort of trigger prompt questions. These have been suggested through the workshops that we've done so far that co-created this tool, and we look forward to perhaps being able to make this more live online once the tool is active, and perhaps we could end up with a data bank of questions that people could pick and choose and use in a workshop setting to open up these conversations. So I won't go into all of these in great detail, but if you look at on the second column there on the right, highlighted in purple, is this question again around language. So how does the language used in recruiting materials leave anyone out? How can you use recruiting tools to make your company more inclusive? And this is something that we could have asked ourselves early on in the project and identified that, you know, Innovation Camp was going to be more inclusive than Hackathon in how we were trying to engage participants in our project. So next slide, please. So working through these tools in a workshop is a fantastic activity to get conversations going within organisations, but we acknowledge that they need to then be formalised into an action plan and turned into a strategy within the organisation. So it's particularly important that within the workshops, you've got people who are enabled to make decisions and set agendas within the company. So an action plan will recommend how the organisation can work towards the implementation of the findings, that the tools are living documents to be revisited and updated throughout the business's life, and measures to ensure continuous progress, monitoring, accountability are necessary to ensure meaningful integration of perhaps the pain points that have been discovered during the workshops. Next slide, please. So as I've said, both of the tools are in the pilot phase and they're not publicly available yet. So I'm especially pleased to be able to share them with you today. And in more detail in the breakout room, we'll look at the sustainable social impact model rather than trying to address both of them so that we can go into some detail on one of them. But of course, we can discuss that in the context of the other model at the same time. So I've gone through the project quite quickly. Hopefully I'll see some of you in the breakout group to have a more focused conversation, but of course we've got a lot of information already on our website in terms of the reports and deliverables that sit behind what I've touched on so far in the presentation today, and you can also reach out to us more directly through the website or through LinkedIn as well. Thank you very much. So the sustainable social impact model at the moment is a worksheet and it's designed to be used in a physical environment. If you can share it in the chat now, that's probably a good time to do that, to share the PDF of the tool.
Yes, of course.
To share that in the chat. But of course, there's huge potential to develop this into a digital tool as well, beyond the conclusion of equals EU. So we're hoping that it's, you know, something that startups can take on to help them kind of frame their business with diversity, equity and inclusion built in from the outset, but also companies that are looking to address challenges that they're facing and to fill in gaps that they've identified. Next slide, please. So the aim of the sustainable social impact model is to ensure that any new idea, product or service has a positive gender inclusive impact. So before we go any further, it's probably good to take a moment and just unpack what's meant by sustainable social impact. Next slide, please. So we take the UN definition for social sustainability here and look at sustainable social impact, meaning to actively manage and identify the effects that businesses have on employees, workers throughout the value chain, customers and local communities. So that's what's really driving our understanding of sustainable social impact that we've embedded into the tool. Next slide, please. And we've built that into the tool by having these three themes that drive how the worksheet is completed. So across the top, we've got these areas of value creation, of social impact and sustainable commercial growth. So these are presented across the top as the header row from the left across. And to understand more easily what these mean, on the next slide, we've got some definitions. So value creation we define as the performance of actions that increase the worth of goods, services, or a business. That social impact looks at transformations that tackle, or at the very least acknowledge, issues of social injustice and difficulties, and sustainable commercial growth being growth that is replicable and encompasses ethical and responsible practices towards current and future communities. So those definitions are there and present in the user manual for this tool, so that users can keep referring back to and understand what's being captured in those themes as they fill out the workshop sheets. Next slide, please. So in addition, there's a column to the right, which we realised needed to be added because there are some responses in relation to the questions that are in the grey boxes down the left that actually can apply to all of those themes. So we've got a sort of, applies to all box on the end there. So it's presented as a simple worksheet designed to be used across any business sector, and by answering the questions down the left, which we'll talk about a bit in a minute, the idea is that organisations can address themes that result in improved digital inclusion and strategies for how gender equity can be implemented within the business. And the completed sustainable social impact model, which we'll look at in a minute, provides the team with the basis for an action plan, including assigning tasks and milestones towards implementation to ensure that the work is actually progressing. Next slide, please. So we've thought about how the workshop could be implemented in different ways, depending on the type of organisation and the number of people and the sort of product area that they might be working with, or the type of service. So overall, we recommend that the tool is used with smaller groups. So a larger organisation might need to break down into smaller groups. And really, there needs to be a facilitator that takes the teams through, that has more knowledge about how to use these tools, ideally, but it's not impossible that a team could get together and kind of self-instruct and work their own way through the project with the use of the resources that we provide through the project. So it could be that each team runs through all of the prompts, the questions in the grey boxes down the side, in relation to all of the three areas: value creation, social impact, and sustainable commercial growth. Then all of the teams kind of get together and bring their ideas to form one plan that sort of takes on the best aspects of everyone's ideas. Or teams could tackle one prompt, just really go into detail with one question, working through all of the three areas, and present their ideas to everyone else, and sort of co-create across the whole organisation a completed worksheet. Or teams could work through all of the prompts, focusing on one pre-assigned area, so going in deep onto one theme. And this option we thought might be useful for organisations where personnel are perhaps specialised in specific areas. So there are ways that this worksheet could be broken up and approached by identifying particular responsibilities or roles or knowledge areas within an organisation. Next slide, please. So it's interesting, I think, at this point, and this is where we're kind of hopeful to get some feedback and some thoughts from other people on how this sheet is being filled in. What I want to do is sort of go through and explain each of the questions on the sheet and provide some examples of some of the responses that we've got from the testing that we've done and the workshops that we put together to actually develop the tool in the first place, of how some people have thought about these ideas and how they've addressed them. So the first one is really sort of a question to open up the conversation. It's a catalyst to get things started. So what questions can you ask to ensure gender inclusive impact and digital inclusion? So this is an opportunity to unpack what these terms mean and to think about how you might self-evaluate the organisation with this understanding of this terminology. So some of the questions that came through, how you might think about this in relation to value creation, social impact, and sustainable commercial growth, are on the screen there. So, you know, at the outset, just asking, have we considered the impact of this idea? And when we talk about an idea here, it could be a new business strategy, it could be a whole new business, it could be all sorts of things that we're sort of fitting into this idea. Have we considered the impact of this idea on different users and in different contexts? So and social impact. Have we actually engaged diverse stakeholders in designing and implementing these ideas? How does the idea support sustainable growth and ensure environmental and social responsibility? So beginning to come at the idea in development from different perspectives. And perhaps then, one thing that could be considered in relation to all of those is building in end user feedback right from the beginning of the process. Next slide, please. So from there, that starts to open up questions around, well, we probably need some more research into some of these areas. So what research do we actually need to do to inform this strategy that we're putting together to ensure gender inclusive impact and digital inclusion against each of these topic areas here? So it's been suggested under value creation that a user survey is essential to target the right audience, who are our users, learning from best practices and existing research, especially in addressing digital inclusion barriers. So there is a lot of research and existing knowledge that can support organisations rather than having to develop everything in-house. So social impact, researching gender-specific challenges and local regional factors, including culture, language, legislation, digital skills, and gender equity to impact gender inclusion. So it's quite a long answer there, but again, it speaks to the importance of localising and understanding regional contexts, and particularly translation of concepts within language and interpretation of concepts to the specific locale that the idea is being implemented. So researching the latest tech for sustainable growth and identify barriers to digital inclusion like compatibility issues under sustainable commercial growth. And then, more holistically studying systemic design and social sustainability projects and how gender inclusion plays a role in that. So there may be research, and these are sort of prompts to start thinking about, well, actually, we have to really look into this to support our strategy. Next slide, please. So from research comes ideas for activities and initiatives that can be implemented. So action, really. So what is the action that is needed to ensure gender inclusive impact and digital inclusion? So, and again, user testing kept on coming up. Like, we need to be working more closely with our users to really understand how receptive they are to our idea, our product, our service, and to uncover biases and challenges across different backgrounds and preferences, across the diverse needs of male and female users, and even beyond male and female gender, of course, as well. So social impact, referring again to existing research to develop plans to reduce negative social impacts and then devise an internal plan for positive social impacts. So being able to see where change needs to be implemented to perhaps redress some pain points. Sustainable commercial growth, seeking outside input. And this is perhaps particularly true for smaller organisations, perhaps that don't have expertise in-house, to actually bring in external players that can be advisors. And then looking to women's resource networks, for example, to actually feed into and monitor the change that's being implemented. Next slide, please. And sort of speaking of monitoring, that's the next aspect that to look at. So once you've sort of done research and you're looking at actions and implementation of ideas, actually, how do you actually measure and verify the impact of those initiatives? Again, in relation to the theme areas of value creation, social impact, sustainable commercial growth. So again, the feedback we got was working really closely with focus groups and user groups to discuss and collect and measure and verify the action that's being laid out. So constant evaluation of the action being undertaken, to establish an inclusive data collection system to measure activity and impact, to share best practices and promote positive examples. So creating networking platforms that link user groups to public and private companies, and also referring to data from past projects or surveys and adjusting ideas if a gender gap is found, continuously monitoring and comparing progress as you implement plans. Next slide, please. And this is one that it's very similar. These two questions are very similar, and I think one of the things we're looking at is whether in fact both questions are really necessary, or is there some way to simplify the sheet a little bit. It is, we've had feedback that the sheet is quite complex, even though it's gone through already a process of simplification, and it might be that we can fold in this idea of evaluation strategies with monitoring tools specifically, and look at one holistic question. But I'll talk through this one as it is at the moment, and perhaps that's something we can get some feedback on. So we know, what are the monitoring tools that can actually ensure ongoing action and continuous improvement? So this is kind of going beyond how effective are we right now in what we're trying out, but how can we actually ensure that we continuously improve on this? So looking at things like impact assessment frameworks with predefined targets and objectives could be implemented, ensuring language is inclusive and up to date for the intended user group, conducting rigorous user and technical tests to ensure products and services don't create digital barriers, but offer opportunities for those with limited access. So, and from a diverse group of user testers that can assess both the tool's impact periodically and use their feedback for improvement. So that starts to speak to some of the specific monitoring tools that could be used. Next slide, please. And lastly, this is a really big one, and it starts to speak to the alignment of this emerging gender equity, digital inclusion strategy with an organisation's perhaps existing strategy around implementation of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, because of course the strategy that emerges from this tool needs to be integrated back into strategies that already exist within the company and the company's overall business strategy, holistic strategy. So this question here is a bit of a reminder to think about, how does this emerging gender equity digital inclusion strategy align with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals? So how can you actually look at where your priorities are there in relation to the strategy that's emerging through this workshop, obviously particularly in relation to SDG 5 around gender. So, and again, some of the mechanisms for doing this are similar to perhaps what might work for some of the other aspects of gender inclusivity. So co-creation workshops with stakeholders, keeping in touch with users and making sure that they're being involved in the process, but also having a critical approach when developing new businesses to ensure that there's no harm to society or the environment, actively seeking sustainable solutions as this strategy is implemented with a particular focus around gender equity and digital inclusion. So next slide, please. So when it is concluded, it looks a little bit like this. It provides a range of provocations for critical reflection on core values and actions. After the work sessions or workshops are finalised, the answers and ideas to the different prompts should be developed into an action items and a priority list. And for each action items, ensure that there's developed a realistic timeline for the initiatives. The timeline should include specific dates for data gathering, for example. The action plan needs to give an insight into who's responsible for follow-ups. It could be a team or a particular job role within the organisation. How should the initiatives be monitored, and specific dates for when a review for the plan should be held. Our suggestion is to have yearly presentations of the results, followed by a review of the gender equity tools and the action plans sometime before the annual board meeting of the organisation. The results might be forwarded to administrators of boards of businesses to ensure steady progress. And a time frame for action for each initiative should be decided on a case-by-case basis. And it could vary due to different organisations' resources and sizes, and which is why we've tried to make it kind of as open as possible for adaptation to particular business contexts. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, look, the tools are currently in prototype piloting phase, which and they were aimed. They've been developed with the aim of sort of self-evaluating how your organisation is faring and how you can improve the status quo. And we're now looking at testing that with some particular groups here in Oslo. The tools as they are represent the cumulative knowledge of the Equals EU project, and we've presented them as prototypes for uptake and further development by interested parties. So within the scope of the Equals EU project, the tools come towards the end. They come as an outcome and as a prototype and a provocation for us to give out to our community, which is in part you guys as well, to take further. So there's tremendous scope to develop these into digital applications and for them to take on other formats. But at this stage, we've got a little bit more time and resources to develop them a bit further, and then we'll be releasing the finalised prototype version through our website and social media channels later in the year. So hopefully that gives you a little bit more of a deeper insight into what we're attempting to do here with this model and the way that we've tried to go about sort of helping organisations unpack what is actually a very complex area. But again, speaking to this idea of fixing practices, trying to make it tangible and actionable and something that teams can access and work with. So we're interested to hear any feedback on this, particularly maybe around implementation. How could you see this being used? We kind of developed it with the idea of businesses that produce products and services, perhaps new businesses or businesses considering introducing a new offering or product line. But also we've had feedback that it could be useful for strategy and policy, and even research projects and research groups could benefit from thinking about what they're working on with this framework in mind. And that then leads us to thinking, well, okay, if it's not just business startups, who else could be interested in a framework like this supporting them in their work? But of course, other comments and questions as well are most welcome, please. Thank you. We've had some feedback that the format of the sheet itself still looks quite complex to some people, that actually the knowledge and some of the terminology is perhaps still requires kind of further refinement to make it a bit more accessible. And I'm wondering how that might read to some of you.
So I think it's, you know, sometimes you might need some time to process it. So obviously, if anyone want to have a look at it in their own time and then send us a feedback, we're more than happy to welcome that. I'm not sure if I'm lagging because I see my internet is really bad today, but okay. Hopefully you managed to get that message from me. Nothing on my tech side is working. I see no slides, nothing. So it's
okay.
It's just one of those days, I guess. But it's I managed to hear everything.
Okay, good. And we can see you, so that's nice.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, no. So from my side, I think especially in terms of if anyone see any other areas that we haven't mentioned that this could be applicable towards, we would love to hear that insight. As well, because obviously we're a part of a European project. So if there's other avenues that we can report on, that I think that would be watched in a good light from the European Commission as well. So these are tools that have been developed, and sometimes you develop tools and you get insights from others about stuff that you haven't thought about. So that's really what we're looking for also. But with having these sessions and having pilot sessions.
I think one of the things that's been quite challenging about this is actually unpacking the complexity of the sort of systemic problems that we're trying to build into this tool. And rather than being able to produce a definitive tool that steps people through to the answer, we've had to approach it in a much more open way of sort of it being a range of provocations and conversation starters to actually get teams on board, because it is a whole of organisation strategy that is required to actually bring about change, which again speaks to why it's really important to have the decision makers in the room as part of this, rather than it just being within sectors of an organisation or being perhaps lower level employees. There needs to be buy-in right from the highest level. So as we prototype these a little bit further, and we'll update the instruction manual that goes with it and the resources, and hopefully try to put together some really easy access materials that people can use to kind of identify, where are those biases and how to actually get past those. And as you say before, fix the practices, as Nicola said.
Okay, we're back. Guess so. Okay. So I hope you enjoyed the 3 different breakout rooms. Now I would like to ask Nicola to start to present what has been discussed in her breakout room, diversity personas.
Yes, thank you very much. So we had diversity personas. We looked at the template, first of all, in terms of what are personas and what is the thing to watch out for regarding personas in gender responsive smart innovation and entrepreneurship. And then we had a case study of a company that had terribly stereotypical personas. Okay, so it was like the busy mom and the tech savvy Gen Z, and then the professional and the yoga instructor who was of course female, and the gamer who was of course male, right? So we worked with these and kind of talked about them, and had some thoughts in terms of, okay, which information would we still need, right? So in the case study, the team kind of just thought of all these personas themselves. So we said, okay, we really need to first of all collect user data and figure out, okay, both quantitatively and also qualitatively, what are we even talking about, which real problems do real users have, and really learn about their needs through contextual inquiry and appropriate methods. We then, since the case study kind of was set up to consult this team on making better personas, we also talked in terms of the problems that you might have trying to convince people who are developing personas that their personas are maybe a little bit in need of improvement, which is also often hard because people love these stereotypical personas and they give them a fake sense of authenticity, actually. So we talked about that. And then in developing better personas, we talked about the importance of integrating more identities and more aspects in one persona. So we had one participant who said, well, I'm all of those, you know, but so the idea is really make personas more complex, and like debias the titles, you know, why does the mom have to be busy, and break with stereotypes. So why is the mom also the one who's a homemaker? Why is it these women who want it all? And make sure you integrate relevant aspects of real users' lives also into the persona. So that was our results from the breakout. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Seems quite active group with very nice results in such a short time frame. Now we move to Edda for the dodging group.
Yeah, thank you. We were also talking about a case study. We had a firm look into the canvas first, but I think Nicola already presented it. So we went into our case study of a firm who has very different tasks. It's a developer company, and it's distributed at the moment quite unfair because all the glamour work is being done by male colleagues, and there are several other tasks mentioned that are mostly invisible for everyone, and who these invisible tasks were done by females, for example, like managing meetings, ordering lunch, looking up for upset colleagues and stuff like that. And also the problem of the remote colleagues who were like left out, and all these invisible tasks. And then we were switching to our canvas as with the thought that we are the facilitators of a meeting to problematize this case. And we were talking about the different tasks that exist there that I just mentioned, and then talked about the idea of having weekly changes and putting all the tasks into the team board, the company is having. Maybe distribute the tasks equally, and also start to recognize all the contribution, for example, from Kostas, is if he's leading a meeting online, also like let him know that everyone has seen this. The idea of labeling glamour work as such wasn't quite easy to decide, because maybe it can ensure a more balanced distribution of the glamour tasks, but maybe it can also like create more gaps if it's visible for everyone that one person is taking all these glamour gaps. And we also took into account that the change of responsibility has to be based on the capabilities that every colleague is bringing in. And I think at the end, we also talked about very shortly when we were just about to leave the room, we talked about how we can make sure that this new change of the distribution of the tasks is actually happening, that the management would be required to overlook this distribution and make sure that everyone is taking their new tasks seriously. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Edda. That's quite a wrap. And last, Jo, with the last room.
Yeah, thank you. It was a really great opportunity to go into detail with the sustainable social impact model a bit more, and to work through how we're trying to open up what is a very complex area of business management, of how you embed gender equity and digital inclusion. And it seems like there is some real value in putting it into a worksheet like this, where you untangle some of the key concerns and break it down into themes around value creation, social impact, and sustainable commercial growth, to kind of produce some workable strategies that come out of that, rather than it being too overwhelming. So it was really good to get that feedback. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jo, and all the speakers and all the participants to have contributed to this workshop of GILL and Equals You on gender design of ICT tools. If you like the activity, we have plenty of new initiatives that we are about to start for next year as well, and also for the end of this year. So please get in touch with us, look at our LinkedIn profile, Twitter profile, and our website. We have many initiatives, as I was saying, in terms of capacity building and training services. And end of this year, we will release this platform. So if you want to be part of the community, please remind to register. And finally, if you also would like to contribute as one of the trainers for our capacity building initiatives, we are really opening up our community to everyone. So just send us a message and we can see how to align our expertise and interest together for the next capacity building program of GILL activities. So thank you so much, and I really hope you have a great rest of the day and a nice weekend. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.